Hello and welcome to the latest of my deep dive videos. Today I'm going to share with you the most important event of the whole Western tropical astrological calendar. It's when the Sun returns to the sign of Aries. We have the vernal equinox, the spring equinox, and it's a new beginning. Zodiac basically in Greek means zodiac, procession of the animals. So it starts with the ram. And of course this is a fire sign. So it's about initiation. It's about getting on the front foot, energizing the strands that are ongoing, that are important to us, or setting our intentions for the things we'd like to go for in the next 12 months ahead. The Western tropical calendar is based on 4 quadrants known as the cardinal quadrants. This is because the sign of Aries is cardinal, which is all about leadership. The next cardinal quadrant starts with the summer solstice, which ushers in Cancer. Then we have the autumnal equinox, which is of course the energy of Libra. And the final cardinal quadrant comes with the energy of Capricorn, very much about where we get a culmination of all the efforts that we've put in, building something up that's more substantive. So by the time the Sun passes through the sign of Pisces, that's very much its wind down, our reflective period. So the Sun's re-emergence into the sign of Aries is truly exciting. If you're a returning viewer, thank you so much for joining me once more. If you're new here, please share any thoughts or observations you have. I interact with all comments. This is very much a community, but please do subscribe. Now, I'm going to just structure how I'm going to approach this video. First up, I'm going to share on the screen the solar event wheel, which is how we can relate to this event collectively, thinking of that first point of Aries as the first house, the ascendant. But then I'm going to share the event chart based on Placidus, which does bring a very different perspective to bear. There are also some other planetary influences which are informing this event in quite a potent way. But please stay with me. I will then dive deep to go through each of the 12 zodiac signs from Aries through to Pisces to give you a flavour of what you can expect over the next 13 weeks. If you would like to understand a lot more about how Sirius astrology can help guide your life, if you give me 3 pieces of personal birth information of time, date and place of birth, I can produce for you your life roadmap report. This can help you to understand some of the patterns that have been repeated in your journey so far, the more challenging ones, but also the ones that give you opportunities. A greater understanding of these can help you to work more effectively with the energy you were given at birth. But also my special package of 30% off, you can get your 12-month personal forecast. No 2 charts are the same, each are totally individually produced for you based on your information. If you don't have a time of birth, I can produce for you my new solar package, which doesn't use an ascendant and does assume the Sun as the first point of your journey. Please also see beneath this video for more. Now on the screen now you can see the solar event chart, which of course has the Sun at 0 degrees in Aries, but that's where we assume the ascendant, whereas on the Placidus event chart the ascendant is actually 4 degrees in Scorpio. So this means that the midpoint between the Sun and the Moon, which is at 18 degrees in Pisces, is actually at 24 degrees and 19 minutes, also in Pisces, but very close to the illusory and sometimes confusing but hypersensitive energies of Neptune. So as we go into this next 13 weeks, we might think that the Mars energy of the sign of Aries would give us a lot of thrust, and it can, but I feel that we need to keep one foot in the most psychological part of our existences. And this is reinforced too because Saturn, the planet of structure, has of course moved into the sign of Pisces and asking us over the next 2.5 years in 2 segments of influence to grapple with how we feel about things in a much more profound way. So there are opportunities to inject situations with more thrust, but because the ruler of the sign of Aries, Mars, is at 27 degrees and 48 minutes in the 3rd house of everyday communications, that's being conflicted by the Sun-Moon midpoint and also Neptune. The Sun-Moon midpoint is the balance of this event. The Sun obviously represents the soul, the thrust, the get-go, whereas the Moon is much more receptive. It's much more about emotional relating. So the balance of the two, the yin-yang, being in Pisces, suggests over the next 13 weeks we still need to keep our emotional antennas really extended and work hard on being very clear about what we mean. There's going to be a lot of communication therefore over the next 13 weeks, which I think is potentially misleading, distorted, not true. It may not be because people are being deliberately dishonest in every case, although there can be some of that. It may simply be because people's perceptions are being skewed by the influence of the midpoint and Neptune, which drains the thrust of the Mars energy in the quick-witted sign of Gemini. The other thing that stood out for me with this chart is the Moon actually does forge a great link with Uranus. Uranus in the sign of Taurus, house 2, everyday resources, but the Moon is in the part of our situation which is to do with being very much aware of conservation. So we may want some space, obviously Uranus and the Moon, but we also need to be aware that for our freedom we have to perhaps take some responsibilities. Also, the North Node is conjunct Venus, the ruler of Taurus, in the 2nd house. I think that actually can be really quite sweet. It could see us being conscious of helping those who are less fortunate, and again being more mindful of the conservation of resources. But the event chart Placidus sees that ascendant in the sign of Scorpio. The Sun-Moon midpoint is still there, it's still conjunct Neptune, but they're in the 5th house, which is very demonstrative, very playful. The Sun, however, is also in the 5th house because the way Placidus works, it doesn't divide the wheel into 30-degree equal slots. But the Moon in the sign of Pisces is in house 4, very much to do with Cancerian energy, feeling secure, being very protective. But that angle with Uranus is in house 7. So we need to stay in touch with how we feel in terms of our emotional communications, even when we might feel a bit more impulsive. But the Mars influence is really critical. This is in house 8, shared resources, also where we're most devoted and invested. And the square, of course, is with the midpoint and Neptune, and that's in house 5. So around love relationships, I feel that if we're attracted to somebody and the energy, the Aries energy, sees us go for it, be very dynamic, take the initiative, and that can create a lot of excitement. I think we really need to be conscious of the underlying energy which could see us attracted towards somebody that we don't actually know what their true motives are, because the energy of Neptune can be so distorting. So I hope that gives you a little bit of a flavour. So we have the new beginning. The Western Tropical Zodiac is split into 4 sections, 4 quadrants, cardinal quadrants, which start with an Earth point, as it's known, hugely influential. This is a new beginning. It does give us the chance to go again, be fresh, but I feel that this particular year we are being asked to stay very much in touch with what's not necessarily obvious. So the subtext, the deeper, more spiritual, psychological, elements that sometimes we find in the Western world a little bit difficult to grapple with. So I think the news cycle generally can be very distorted. I think we are going to see a lot more scandals come into the open, where people have tried to hide things and manipulate the agenda or the truth or statements in order to create an impression, and I think quite a few people are going to get caught out. But in terms of your sun or your ascendant, please stay with me as I go through each of them now. So Aries, the spring equinox ushers in the sun's arrival to your sign, but of course it's joining with Mercury, with Chiron, but crucially also with Jupiter. This gives you a lot of thrust, which is really exciting. It's just you do need to keep being available for those undercurrents which are not quite so obvious. I feel that Saturn over the next couple of years is going to wheedle out of your life some interests, some people, some friendships that just no longer serve your greater good. But because you've got a new moon coming right on the back of this event, and of course also a solar eclipse at the end of the time that the sun makes its journey through the sign of Aries this year, and you've got the North Node coming into your sign on the 13th of July, there's a lot of very progressive energy that's going to be unfolding for you. It's just do be mindful of the need just to stay in touch with those more hidden, not necessarily obvious areas of your existence. One of the things that you can concentrate on in a more practical way is really thinking carefully about who you can really rely upon in your situation. If there's any lack of full and total support, it's not that that person will necessarily be a bad person, but they may not be the people you need around you for the rest of this year, which is going to see some exciting new beginnings. So Taurus, the gathering of energy in the sign of Aries, which is augmented by the sun, is very much to do with reflection. And you could do some of that over the next few weeks. But it also wouldn't be a surprise if you wanted to spend time with the people that you feel really comfortable with. And any kind of group activity which does have a more spiritual or emotional dimension to it can actually be really very good for your soul. And that's the way I feel that you should think about the next 13 weeks. There's going to be a lot of time to just sift through what's really important to you. And what Saturn's doing is asking you to think about the long term, because that is going to be really critical. Saturn's asking you to refine your aspirations for the long term. And I feel that some fair weather friendships may make way. And I feel that if you do have a desire to just step back a little bit over the next 3 or 4 weeks particularly, and just have a little bit more time to mull over your direction in life, don't see that as a negative at all. See it as a very necessary and important thing to give yourself the time and space to just let your feelings and senses settle to the point where you feel really sure of your longer term moves. So Gemini, the spring equinox definitely brings a sense of hope. And also, if you're someone who does really enjoy connecting to others, I think there's going to be a lot of interaction going on, not just over the next 4 weeks, not just over the next 3 months, but also over the next half year, because at the end of the journey of the sun through Aries, we do have a solar eclipse. But your connections to others could be surprisingly to do with your work, or anything to do with a property matter, or if you work for yourself, if you're more entrepreneurial, your network is going to be really critical in some of the moves and also successes that you have. So refining your connections is going to be an exciting part of this period. Some new people can come in and they can provide a lot of uplift. But if you do want to really still make progress in terms of the more physical world, Saturn's arrival in the sign of Pisces suggests that you will have to roll up your sleeves and really apply yourselves. But I think that this spring equinox gives you permission to be yourself, for sure, because your ruler Mercury is so closely aligned with the Sun. So it's a great opportunity for you to dazzle people with the array of your talents, but also your unique way of interacting with people. So Cancer, for you, this is an opportunity to think about how you connect to the wider world. With Mercury so close to the Sun, your communicational approach, therefore, is key. But with the buoyant Jupiter in the mix, good fortune can come to those who really go for it. It's just that because you have that collection of energy still in the sign of Pisces, there is a need, I feel, to perhaps consider new information, new approaches, or perhaps even higher education. But Mars is obviously a critical issue because it is stirring the pot. It is going to be moving into your sign on the 25th, which will be really welcome after quite a bruising time during its journey through the sign of Gemini. But I feel that if you do want to make a greater impact, raise your profile, it's about how you reach out to people that's going to be really important. If you can amplify your talents, your message in a really positive way, you're going to make progress. So I feel that what Mars can do is just chip away at your confidence a little bit, or take away a little bit of vitality, which can prevent you from really seizing the moment. So important to overcome any inner blockages. And if you really want to set your sights high, the next 13 weeks can still see you prosper. So Leo, the gathering of energy in your fellow fire sign of Aries, not just the Sun, Mercury and Jupiter, Chiron too, is all about giving you the encouragement to be daring. Sounds good, doesn't it, on paper? It's just that there's part of your nature that likes a degree of continuity because you're a fixed sign. And of course Mars, which is very much about thrust and is the ruler of Aries, is conflicted by the draining influence of the midpoint and also Neptune. So if there's a situation that you've brought into, you've invested in emotionally, romantically, or even financially, just breaking free and being a more abandoned spirit is not necessarily going to be quite as easy as it sounds. But the opportunity's there. I feel that you may just need to be assured that financially, if you take any risks to change things up, embrace more of a varied approach, or want to create more space and freedom for yourself, even if it's around your interest, it does need to work for you in terms of the finance, but also in terms of your connection with anyone else. Now, Virgo, for you, the spring equinox really is a time of potential transformation. And because your ruler Mercury is so closely in the mix, Mercury in the 8th house is brilliant for diving deep to understand not what's being said, but what's really meant. So the subtext. But there is that draining, potentially confusing influence coming from your sector of relationships. When it comes to your professional situation, for example, you may feel that you're worthy of more money because obviously costs have gone up. So there is a lag, and a lot of us are feeling that. But I feel the way you interact with anyone who is in a position of influence has to really cut through the potential fog that Neptune can create. But if you are going through a sense of big change, and it is around a romantic relationship, there may be the need to let go of some things that you were deeply invested in the past. And that's not necessarily a straight line process. And for a sign like you, who likes things to be fairly, if not ordered, at least clear, at least linear in how they unfold, that can be a bit of a challenge. But equally, the 8th house can be where we expand psychologically hugely just by giving ourselves the permission to be much more open to some of the potential cycles that we all go through in our lives. So if you can be philosophical about some things that are coming to a close, but also excited about some of the things that are regenerating, then that's just the right approach to take. So Libra, the spring equinox puts the focus very much on relationships, but also where you need to come into contact with others. Clarity is the key with Mercury in the mix, but also positivity with Jupiter is going to be a big help too. But because of that midpoint and Neptune in a very self-sacrificing part of your situation, I don't feel it's good for you if you really tie yourself in knots being a people pleaser to the point that other people then don't see what your needs are in a situation. That ends up you feeling rather invisible and rather empty. So I think the lessons of the last few years with Pluto's help has been about boundaries. Now Saturn is in the part of your situation that's to do with precision. And it could be that it's business relationships or a work interaction or some kind of partnership in an interest or hobby that you have with someone else that you can enjoy some growth over the next 13 weeks. It doesn't only have to be in a romantic context. So Scorpio, the sixth house energy of the spring equinox, is brilliant for spring cleaning, for sifting through things, having a root out, creating some more space, extra air flowing through your home. It may sound rather dull and boring, but it probably will make you feel better. You know, if you've got books that are gathering dust that you don't read, or clothes that you could recycle to a charity shop, even sell, create some spare cash, why not go for it? But also the sixth house can be where we're most invested to help others, where we are of service, where we are dutiful. And that can be an area that grows for you over the next 3 months. But Mars, conflicted by Neptune and also the midpoint, suggests for you to really get something from this. It has to feel right. There has to be a real depth of connection, and if that is missing, then the engagement won't work for you. So you do need that spark. So even if you try to be more virtuous, it needs to be in areas that actually give you some kind of pleasure or satisfaction. So Sagittarius, it's bright, it's breezy, it's fresh, and of course this particular spring equinox has your ruling planet Jupiter in the mix too, which is really exciting because the fifth house is about really being upbeat, positive, demonstrating our flair, our talents, our individuality, our warmth. So all these things can radiate from you over the next 13 weeks. What's not to like? Well, of course, you do have Saturn in the fourth house, and that potentially enervating link between the midpoint and Neptune in a contact with Mars in your sector of relationships. So the first base of where you express yourself, I feel, has to feel right. And because you're naturally very positive and dive into situations with real relish, I think what Saturn's going to ask you to do over the next couple of years is just check out, go through the process of how does this feel. If it all feels good, go for it. And that's really, it's quite binary really. If you're really feeling that enthusiasm and it is being reciprocated in your senses, then you're giving yourself that inner green light. Now Capricorn, for you, this event is very much about feelings. And of course, feelings is something that requires us sometimes to be a bit more vulnerable. Mercury in the fourth house is not so easy. It's an influence that can see us recycling thoughts around our minds that we may be anxious about. But with Jupiter, you know, adding a lot of uplift to the fourth house, I feel that over the next 13 weeks, you're going to want to enjoy your environment, enjoy where you're living, enjoy your family. So the key is clarity of communication. And Saturn could see at times people question some of your ideas, some of your mode of communication, whether you're replying to things quite as quickly as they would like, or you seem to be as available to the communicational flow as people want. Those are going to be important to how you are perceived in terms of a feeling being, but also how you can interact with others. So there does need to be some efficiency around emails, text messages, letters, personal conversations in terms of sharing your sense of well-being or nurture, and that's the thing to really embrace. Aquarius, it's very much about communication. This third house energy with Mercury, the ruler of the third house, in the mix, and Jupiter there as well, could potentially be very fortunate for you over the next 3 months. But of course that second house energy, along with Saturn, it's just saying in the angle between Neptune and the midpoint and Mars, if you go for it on something, you need to really be sure of your basis. So certainly when it comes to investment or risk or speculation, go through things in a very thorough way. But I feel a lot of exciting communication is set to unfold over the next 3 months. Now Pisces, for you, the gathering of energy in house 2, the sign of Aries, includes your traditional ruler of Jupiter. So that's really, really exciting. But of course you do have Saturn newly arrived in your sign. And that could cramp your style a little bit, certainly asking you to narrow your focus. And if you are trying to do something around a property matter with Mars angling back to the midpoint and Neptune, I feel that Saturn's asking you not to do too much. Just go through things systematically and don't really invest any kind of hard and fast cash until you're really sure of exactly how things might turn out. So a lot of thinking needs to examine all the different scenarios, and because Neptune can confuse, or your sensitivities can get rather overwhelmed, that can affect your physical practical decision making. So just be aware of that. But with Venus in a great link with the North Node, there can be some conversations with people around you that can offer some wise counsel when it comes to your resources. It's been a real pleasure being with you. Thank you so much for joining me. All the best for this spring equinox, and please do comment and subscribe.